So, good morning, everyone. My name is Arafat. I teach history on the Testbook platform. So, in this session, let us discuss a very important topic of ancient Indian history, that is the megalithic culture. So, this topic is very important. This topic is mostly important from preliminary examination point of view. So let us understand what megalithic culture is. Let us understand various aspects of megalithic culture. Okay, point. So let's start our discussion. So this megalithic culture uh, existed between 1000 BC and 300 BC time period. This megalithic culture flourished in India between 1000 BC to about 300 BC time period. That's the time during which this culture flourished. So, what is megalithic? Megalithic is basically formed of two Greek words. One is a mega, another is mega refers to huge, and lithic refers to stone. Refers to huge, and lithic refers to stone. So, megalithic essentially means huge stones. Megalithic essentially refers to huge stones. So basically, these were the stones, these were the large sized stones that were raised in the memory of the dead people. Basically, these were the huge stones, megaliths, basically the huge stones that were raised in the memory of the dead people. So this culture, we will get to know what this megalithic culture in a while. The point is, megalithic refers to the huge stones, and these were stones that were raised in the memory of dead people. So the point is, the megalithic culture, it 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 falls. Megalithic culture is basically the Iron Age culture of South India. Megalithic culture is basically the Iron Age culture of South India. This was because the use of iron in South India began precisely during the megalithic period. When I say megalithic period, I am basically referring to time period between 1000 BC and BC period. So the megalithic culture is basically the Iron Age culture South India. We call this as an Iron Age culture because the use of iron in South India, I am very particular about it. The use of iron in South India began during this period, that is during the megalithic. So let us first take a look at the cultural evolution in South India. Let us take a look at the cultural evolution in South India. You might be knowing that in North India, cultural evolution began with the Paleolithic period. Then it evolved into the Mesolithic period. Then thereafterwards, it evolved into the Neolithic period, third phase, Neolithic period. Then thereafter, Neolithic paved the way for the Chalcolithic period, and the Chalcolithic period finally uh, paved the way for the emergence of Iron Age. So the point is, in North India, the cultural evolution started with Paleolithic. Then it over a period of time evolved into Mesolithic. Then Mesolithic paved the way for Neolithic, Neolithic to the Chalcolithic, and finally to the Iron Age. So this was the cultural evolution that we can see in northern part of India. But in southern part of India, the cultural evolution started from the Paleolithic. Then it paved the way for Mesolithic, from Mesolithic to Neolithic. But South India, we don't see any distinct Chalcolithic. South India, we do not see distinct Chalcolithic culture. We don't see a distinct Chalcolithic culture in South India. Rather, uh, after the completion of the Neolithic phase in South India, directly the Iron Age began. In other words, in South India, the Iron Age developed, bypassing the Chalcolithic period. That was not the case in northern part of India. I hope I am clear. So the point is, after the end of the Neolithic phase in South India, what culture emerged in North India is basically the Iron Age culture. So it was during this Iron Age culture, in fact, the megalithic culture belongs to the Iron Age culture of South India. Is basically the Iron Age culture of South India. So with this information, let us continue with our discussion. The point is, just bear with me for some more time. I will get into the details of the Chalcolithic. Will get into the details of the Mesolithic. Sorry, I will get into the details of megalithic culture in a while. But before that, let us take a look at the geographical distribution of the megalithic culture. Let us take a look at the geographical distribution. Where all was this culture found? The point. The point is, the evidence of the megalithic culture comes from almost all parts of the Indian subcontinent, but there are some exceptions. The point is, the evidence for the existence of the megalithic culture been found from almost all parts of the Indian subcontinent, but there are some exceptions. So, for example, we don't see this culture at all, the Indo-Gangetic Basin, mostly in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. We don't see any evidence of the existence of this culture, this Indo-Gangetic Basin. Similarly, we don't see the existence of this culture Rajasthan. We also don't see the existence of this culture in Gujarat. So, apart from, except for these three areas, the evidence for the existence of the megalithic culture comes from almost all parts of Indian subcontinent. But this culture, the megalithic culture, is dominantly spread in the Deccan part of India and southern part of India. The evidence of this culture comes from all parts of the Indian subcontinent, but the point is, there are three exceptions where we don't see this culture at all. One is Indo-Gangetic, second is Rajasthan, third is Gujarat. But there are this culture is more predominant in part of India, also in southern part of India. What is this culture? Why do we call this culture as megalithic? That I will be explaining shortly. So take a look at some very important sites. In fact, uh, you should know these sites. You should remember the names of these sites, because many times UPSC has asked questions on the sites as well. That's the point. So I told you South India, Deccan is rich for the megalithic culture. Mostly we see large number of megalithic sites spread in Karnataka. So for example, Brahmagiri, a very important megalithic site. Similarly, Sanganakallu. Similarly, Hirebenakal. Hirebenakal is another very important megalithic site of Karnataka. So the point is, megalithic in general is very rich in South India. Megalithic culture is very rich in South India. Particularly in Karnataka, we get to see large number of megalithics. Then we also see the numerous megalithic sites in Tamil Nadu. Particularly, we get to see them the Nilgiri region of Tamil Nadu. For example, we have sites like Adi Channallur, Kiyampalli. These two are very important sites, Adi Channallur and Kiyampalli. Then we have Andhra Pradesh, numerous sites in Andhra and Telangana as we have numerous sites in Andhra and Telangana as well. So, for example, two very important megalithic sites of Andhra Pradesh is Nagarjunakonda and Amaravati. For example, in Hyderabad, for example, in Telangana, we have capital of Telangana is Hyderabad. Hyderabad also has a considerable number of megalithic sites. Surrounding areas of Hyderabad, we can come across numerous megalithic sites. In Kerala, so in Kerala, we have a very, very famous place called Porkalam. It's a very important megalithic site, Porkalam. Then Maharashtra, we have a place known as Junapani. Junapani, and mostly in Maharashtra, we get to see this megalithic culture mostly in the Vidarbha region. Region get to see this megalithic culture. So, region around Nagpur, where we see the existence of this. Then we also have evidence of this culture from Jammu Kashmir. In Jammu and Kashmir, we have two important sites. One is 𝐍𝐬𝐫𝐬, �BURZAHOM, 𝐍𝐬𝐫𝐬. Second is Gufral. Both of these sites are located close to that of Srinagar. Both gives evidence of the practice of megalithic culture. I told you megalithic means huge stones. Megalithic refers to huge stones. These were the stones that were raised the memory of the dead people. So this is a geographical spread of the megalithic sites. In fact, in this particular slide, you can get to know, you will have you have even more number of sites, but you kindly make it a point to remember the sites I have mentioned in sites. Sites Brahmagiri, the Karnataka sites, Tamil Nadu sites, Andhra and Telangana sites, then Maharashtra and Jammu Kashmir. These are very important sites. Then take a look at the structural forms. I told you basically the megalithic are basically stones that were raised on top of the tombs. Basically, the megaliths happen to be the huge stones that are were raised on top of the tombs. The point is, the megalithic people practice different. The point is, the megalithic people practiced. Uh, uh, they decorated they decorated their graves in different forms. So let us understand those different decorational forms uh, of the graves that were practiced by the megalith. Take a look at this picture. Later I will explain. So basically, we call this as a cane burial. Cane burial means dead body is buried, and around this tomb we see large staged large stones placed in circle. So basically, cane burial means the stones that were placed around the tomb in circle is referred to as cane burial. So we see this type of burials uh, from various sites of South India and Deccan. We call this type of burial as cane burial. So cane burial essentially means stones arranged in a circle around the tomb is called as cane burial. And this was a very common type of burial that was practiced during the megalithic period. You see another type of burial, we call it as a menhir burial. So basically, menhirs, these are huge stones that were raised on top of vertical stones, huge vertical stones that were placed on top of the. Just see for yourself the size of this tomb. So the size of this tomb is not less than 12 feet. The point. These were the huge stones that were raised on top of the tombs. Call them as basically the upright, large sized upright stone that is placed on top of the tomb is called as a menhir. This was also a very common type of burial that was practiced during the megalithic time period. Take a look at another burial. We call this as the third form is cyst burial. Cyst, this is nothing but This is a stone coffin. Assisted burial is basically stone coffin, like how we have the wooden coffins, which the dead bodies are placed, and the wooden coffin is later buried under the soil. In a similar way, stone coffins were made in which the dead bodies were placed, and then afterwards they were buried under the soil. We call that type of a burial as the cyst burial. This was also a very common type of burial, cyst burial. Cyst burial, in simple, simple terms, this is basically stone coffins, um, which were constructed, in which the bodies of the dead people were placed, and afterwards the entire structure was buried under the soil. Then we have another very common type of a burial, which we call as a dolmen. Dolmen is basically a large flat stone that was placed on top of vertical pillars, on top of upright pillars, called as a dolmen. Let me repeat this point once again. This dolmen, a large flat stone, was placed on top of uh, upright stones, called as dolmen. So basically, this was also a very well, under these stones. There was basically a tomb. On top of this tomb, there was constructed. The point. Then we have another type of a tomb known as the sarcophagus. Sarcophagus. Sarcophagus is basically above the ground stone coffins. Above the ground, above the ground stone coffins. Above the ground stone coffins. At a point. So which were made to place the dead body. Inside these, uh, above the ground coffins, the dead body was placed, and then afterwards it was covered with the lid. Afterwards, the entire coffin was covered with the lid. You can just see the ram-shaped sarcophagus. So basically, this sarcophagus, you can see a lid on top of it. Basically, these were above the ground coffins. These were not buried under the soil. They were just kept on top of the soil itself, in which the dead body was placed. Then afterwards, it was covered with a lid. And all of this was made with stone or with mud. Stone or mud built stuff. Call them as sarcophagus. This was also very common type of burial that was practiced during the megalithic time period. That's the point. So the point is, I just told you that this megalithic culture flourished between 1300 B time period. This culture mostly flourished in and part of India. Important sites I have already told you. What do we mean by megalithic? Megalithic basically means large structures that were raised in the memory of the dead people. What structures? I just showed you different methods in which the megalithic people decorated their graves. Basically, they gave a lot of importance to decoration of their decoration. So, what all burial methods which I have just discussed are uh, different decorations which the people have followed for their graves. Different burial decorations are followed during that 1000 to 300 BC time period. The point. The point. The point is, why are we discussing this topic now? The point is, take a look at it. The point is, was this culture specific to India? Was this culture, that is the megalithic culture, specific to India? The answer is no. The point is, the archaeologists have discovered the existence of megalithic cultures in different parts of the world, not just culture is not very unique to India. Same culture also be seen in other parts of the world. So, for example, take a look at the next picture. So, they are basically a world phenomenon. So basically, the same type of or similar type of structures can also be found in other parts of the world. But the center is basically structure in India. Then in Russia also it was practiced. In France also it was practiced. Ireland also it was practiced. This is basically land. Hellenish is basically in look at basically very important Megalithic site and we call as Stonehenge. I've seen this photograph, this image earlier as well, because this is Stonehenge, a very very important, very famous megalithic site of India. The whole point which I'm trying to convey is megalithic was not unique to India. Same type of a culture also in other parts of the. But why are we discussing this? See, the point is most likely the people who practiced this type of decoration were most likely nomadic people or semi-nomadic people. Let me repeat this point once again. Point is, the people who practiced the megalithic culture or the people who belonged to the megalithic culture uh, were most likely semi-nomadic people. In other words, they did not settle down in one location for a prolonged period of time. They kept moving from one place to other place. But the point is, the people who belonged to the megalithic culture most likely did not live a settled life. They kept moving from one place. So the point is, they kept moving from one place to other place, possibly because they were pastoralists. People who practice this culture did not live in one single area because possibly they were pastoralists. That is, they mostly depended on domestication of animals for their survival. So, along with their animals, they kept moving from one place to other place. The point is, we do have good amount of information about these people, and what is important is our knowledge of these people. That is, our knowledge of megalithic people comes not from their settlements but from their graves. Kindly understand this. The point is, these people who practice the megalithic culture, not live a settled life. They kept moving from one place to other place. Reason being, they were pastoralists. So, along with their cattle, along with their domesticated animals, they kept moving from one place to other place. So, we do, particularly the archaeologists now have a good amount of information of the people belonging to the megalithic culture, but our information, our knowledge of the megalithic people does not come from their habitation because they never led a settled life. Our knowledge of the people belonging to the megalithic culture comes from their graves. So, whatever knowledge which we have, I will be discussing a few points related to megalithic people, but whatever knowledge which we have belonging to or relating to the megalithic people comes from their graves. So their graves were basically marked graves because they have decorated their graves. And the archaeologists, out of just curiosity, began digging, digging the graves. When they dug the graves, um, to their surprise, the archaeologists began coming across various goods used by those people buried along with the dead body inside the graves. Let me repeat this point once again. The point is, the megalithic graves are marked graves. So the archaeologists, just out of curiosity, started digging those graves, and uh, to their surprise, the archaeologists started finding the various goods used by them deposited inside the graves. The whole point which I'm trying to convey, our knowledge of the megalithic people does not come from their habitation, They mostly come from their graves, which are basically marked graves. That's the point. They're basically marked graves. So let us understand what the culture of the megalithic people was, what was their subsistence pattern, what kind of economic system they followed, what kind of social life they led. Let us understand different aspects of the megalithic people. Let us understand first the material culture of the megalithic. What was their material culture? So basically, the evidence of megalith, the evidence of the material culture of the megalithic people comes from their graves only. Evidence of the material culture of the megalithic people comes from their graves. I just told you the archaeologists, out of curiosity, dug out those graves. To their surprise, they began to come out. They began to come across the various goods used by the people belonging to the megalithic. So basically, the material culture of the megalithic period is reflected in two major objects. One is pottery. One is pottery. So, uh, pottery began to be discovered inside the graves. This pottery was buried along with the dead bodies. And this pottery, the name given to this pottery discovered by the archaeologist is RW. It is black and red. Basically, these were red colored pottery, but designed with or painted with black design. Basically, this is a red color pottery painted black designs. So therefore, the archaeologists have named this type of a pottery as a BRW, for black and red ware pottery. Mind you, this pottery was not discovered above the ground. Pottery was discovered buried along with the dead bodies. And similarly, numerous metallic objects also began to be discovered. So, for example, iron objects, large quantities of iron objects, but of all the iron objects that were discovered, there were more iron funds than the iron. So basically, I will explain this point shortly. But the point is, inside the graves, numerous iron objects were discovered. Like say, for example, uh, spear, uh, knives, sickle. That's the point. So various iron objects have been discovered inside that of the graves. And similarly, gold and silver ornaments have also been discovered. Third, copper ornaments and utensils, copper ornaments have also been discovered inside the graves. So the point is the material culture of the megalithic people reflected in two things. One is pottery, second is metallic object. Metallic object. Just told you that a distinct type of a pottery has been discovered inside these caves. The archaeologists named these pottery as BRW, uh, stands for black and red. And similarly, different types of metallic objects have also been discovered. Mostly, numerous iron tools and weapons have been discovered. Similarly, gold and silver ornaments. Third, that is gold and silver ornaments. Third, third, copper ornaments have also been, and utensils have also been. That's about the material culture. Then what about their settlement pattern? Where did we come across when I mean by when I what I meant by settlement pattern is from where, in what locations did the archaeologists discover their graves, the graves of the megalithic people? What locations or in which location did the archaeologists discover these graves? Mostly, the megalithic graves have been discovered dominantly from three different locations. Have been discovered mostly in the part of India. Graves have been discovered mostly in Deccan and southern part of India. Even in Deccan and southern part, the people of the megalithic culture specifically chose to live near three regions. One is they mostly chose to live near mountains and hills. They mostly chose to live near mountains, possibly because they wanted rocks which are available near the mountains and hills. They wanted rocks because they used rocks for decorating their graves. So, from where do you get where in which locations did the archaeologists find these graves? The graves were discovered mostly from three different locations. One, invariably close to the top mountains and hills, as the people of the megalithic culture wanted perhaps wanted rocks. They 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 wanted rocks because they used the rocks to decorate the graves. And since huge boulders and huge rocks were available only near hills, the people of this culture preferred to live near mountains and hills. That is the first location from where, from first location uh, uh, where most of the, the graves, the megalithic graves have been discovered. Second, the megalithic people also chose to live near mines. This was because the megalithic people practiced numerous crafts. For example, iron smithing. They practiced iron smithy extensively, and therefore they preferred to live near sources or the places where iron ore was available. In other words, uh, the megalithic people chose to live near mines. This was because megalithic people practiced numerous crafts, particularly iron, and therefore they preferred to live near a region where there was ample availability of iron ores. So the second region where the megalithic graves have been discovered in large numbers was near mines. Third, source of water. This is obvious because for existence or survival need water. So the megalithic people lived near sources of water. So from these three locations that the archaeologists have discovered uh, the the megalithic graves. It is from these regions that most of the megalithic graves have been discovered. Close to these regions, then what about their subsistence base? What did the people of the megalithic culture do for their living? That's the point. So most scholars believe that the megalithic people mostly practiced pastoralism as well as hunting and gathering. Most scholars believe that the of the megalithic culture mostly practiced pastoralism as well as hunting and gathering. So basically, pastoralism, hunting and gathering activity was their primary economic activity, depended on pastoralism for their. This is indicated by the discovery of large number of iron weapons than that of the tools inside the graves. I told you inside the graves only iron weapons and iron tools have been discovered. More than the iron tools, uh, iron weapons have been discovered in large number. So when compared to iron tools, more number of iron weapons have been discovered inside. So usually people who practice domestication use more of weapons than that of the tools. The people who practice agriculture as their primary economic activity use mostly the tools, not the weapon. So it's a very obvious explanation that if you come across more number of weapons than tools, it indicates that the people who use them mostly were involved in domestication or at times even hunting and gathering act. Because it is with the weapons carry out the hunting and gathering act. But in case if you discover more number of tools, it indicates that people who use them mostly depended on agriculture. The point is, inside the graves, more number of weapons were discovered when compared to the tools. This indicates that uh, people of the megalithic culture possibly practiced pastoralism as well as hunt gathering as their primary economic activity. Then what about agriculture? Agriculture was also practiced, but it was uh, secondary economic activity. Agriculture was also practiced by the megalithic, but it was a secondary economic activity. Agriculture was practiced, but on a limited scale. Agriculture was practiced, but the people mostly depended on pastoralism as well as hunting and gathering for their existence during the megalithic period. Then what crops did the people cultivate? So, for example, in central India, wheat was cultivated, barley and lentils were cultivated. Get this evidence. In central India, wheat, barley, and lentils were cultivated. Whereas in South India, which is basically uh, water deficit region, mostly millets were cultivated. We get evidence of rice, but on a scale, mostly millets were cultivated. Green gram was. Whereas in North India, where climate is suitable for wheat, it was cultivated. Barley was also cultivated. Lentils, particularly in central part of India. So basically, what did the megalithic people do for their living? Mostly depended on pastoralism, but they also practiced agriculture, but on a limited. Agriculture was also practiced, but on a limited. Kindly remember. Then what about their social life? What was their social life like? So the point is, I told you that our entire information of the megalithic people comes from their graves only. It is on the basis of the graves trying to form an understanding about the various aspects of people, including their social life. Then what about their social life? So many scholars believe that the megalithic society was a patriarchal society. Many scholars believe that the megalithic society was a patriarchal society, which we mean male dominated. But how did the scholars have come to this conclusion? What basis scholars came to this? Point is, when the graves were dug out, mostly the male skeletons were discovered inside the graves. The graves were discovered belonging to the megalithic period. Mostly the male skeletons were discovered. We hardly come across female skeletons inside these highly decorated graves. Inside these highly decorated graves, mostly the male skeletons were discovered. So it points that possibly the male members were given more importance at that point of time, and it possibly points to uh, the practice of patriarchy during the megalithic time. So basically, the megalithic society was a patriarchal, male dominated. Then, second, the megalithic society was also a class divided. So people, even during the megalithic period, were divided on the basis of the financial status. So possibly there were people belonging to the middle class, there were people belonging to middle class, also people possibly belonging to lower classes. So the megalithic society possibly was a class divided society because not all the megalithic graves had grave goods. The point is, the graves were dug out by the archaeologist. Inside the graves, only mostly the male skeletons were discovered. That's the point. Mostly the male skeletons, mostly the male skeletons were discovered. So the whole point is, inside these graves, while in some graves, while in some graves, grave goods were discovered, while in some graves, grave goods were, while in some other graves, grave goods were not. What does it indicate to? It indicates to the existence of uh, differences in the society on the basis of their wealth. So possibly some people during the megalithic period were rich. Therefore, when the person died, along with the dead body, the goods belonging to him were also buried. Whereas some other people perhaps were not rich. So therefore, when they died, only their body was buried, and no goods were buried along with them. So this points to the existence of uh, ranked society during the time. Then what about their religious beliefs? So let me repeat the point once again. Our entire knowledge of the megalithic society, our entire knowledge of different aspects of the megalithic culture, be it economic aspect, social aspect, religious aspect, all of which, all of it comes only from the. So what about their religious life then? The point is, generally scholars believe that foods are buried along with the dead person only when they have belief in afterlife. Scholars believe that in general, foods are buried along with the dead bodies only when people believe in afterlife or life after death. Only when they believe that there is one more life after death, only in such a case that people tend to bury the good. The point is, in many of the various grave goods have been discovered. In many of the graves, many of the megalithic grave goods have been discovered. So what does that indicate? It indicates to their religious belief. It indicates to their belief in life after death. Beyond this, we really do not know anything about this. And this culture flourished or existed in India between 1000 time period, and mostly this culture flourished or existed in India. That's all about the Megalithic culture. So this topic is very important. You should know what the many times questions were asked from the topic, particularly from Tim's stage of in future could be asked. That's all about this topic. Thank you. See you in the next class. Please subscribe to the Nirnay IAS channel. Thank you.